some the thing that identifies you as a Buddhist is refuge. So we'll do that. We'll discuss what that is, and we'll start off with a mandala offering, which means you imagine the most perfect universe that is possible to your imagination without hesitation. If you don't know the hand gesture, it's fine. You just got to imagine that you are creating the most perfect universe, and every being in that universe has reached a state of perfection in whatever that means to you. And some people imagine, gold and lights and whatever, and other people imagine states of being. So we'll do that in a bribe for our minds to be able to be in that state of close to perfection, so we can experience some insight. And then we'll do refuge.
Sashi
Kuki Jushin Metotram Rira Lingshin Yundegam Padi Sangye Shindu Mitegu Argi Droku Namda Shimla Juparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnitayami
Sangye
Chidam Sohi Choknam La Janchu Bardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Jinyengi Pesonam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Druparsho
Sangye
Chudam Soki Choknam Lam Janchu Bardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Jinyengi Pesonam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Druparsho
Sangye
Chudam Soki Choknam La Janchu Bardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Jinyengi Pesonam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Druparsho. Okay, so take a comfortably seated position. We're going to do a short meditation. The key here is that the base of your body is nice and stable. It's glued to the ground as if it's part of the ground, and that base provides support for your spine, which is beautifully straight, almost pulled up as if you've got a string pulling you at the crown of your head. The idea is that the spine is stacked like coins, one on top of each other. And then that you scan your body and you remove any tension from your legs. Bring your attention to that, your hips. If you become aware of your tummy, just where your belly button is, you tuck it in just a tiny bit to create a sense of awareness around the navel towards the spine. And then gradually move up your torso and relax your shoulders. They're not leaning forward. They're not overly stretched back. And your hands are either in peaceful rest on your thighs or in Tibetan pose, right hand over the left palm, thumbs touching, whichever is most comfortable to you. Do a quick scan of your neck and face, removing any tension from your eyelids, your frown. Allow the corners of your mouth to smile just a tad. Once you've relaxed that way, just breathe. There's a Kagyu tradition where you do 3 breaths, and a deep inhalation looks for any ignorant desires that are trapping you in samsara, and then the exhale gets rid of them. And the second breath is ignorant dislikings like anger and jealousy. And the third one is ignorance itself, the thing that prevents you from enlightenment. So take the 3 of these breaths at your own pace and just remove anything that's stopping you from engaging with the highest sense of self that you can reach today. Imagine that with that small practice, every single worry can drift away, at least for the next 2 hours, if not for the rest of the day and beyond. Any major concern or hope or tension at all, any conflict can just leave you and leave your mind, at least for the next 2 hours. Imagine what it would be like to be freed of all these worries, all these attachments. And do that by focusing on the breath, the inhale and exhale sensation at the tip of your nostrils. See if you can bring your mind's attention focused just on that sensation. The breath exiting your nostrils. Even if you can feel the tiny hairs moving there. Warm air coming out. Entering your nostrils, you feel the sensation cooler and filling up your lungs. And just allow your mind to come back always to the breath if it gets distracted. No tension, every worry gone. Just you and the breath. And do a round of 10. Once you feel the natural rhythm of the breath entering and exiting your body, see if you can see it from a further perspective so you are less and less connected with that movement. And your mind is free to go to a place of deeper meditation. I'll lead you through a meditation called the Golden Room. So now that all worries and unnecessary concerns are drifted away, they won't call you now. Allow your mind to imagine a place somewhere on this earth that is high up in a mountain, far away from anywhere, very isolated and very, very high up. Imagine up high in that mountain, a small but beautiful and cozy and warm cabin, lots of windows overlooking a massive valley and another huge mountain range across the valley. And you are standing in your cabin. It's very homey, just however you like it. Everything you need is there. And you are standing by this massive window looking out. You can see the huge mountain range in the distance, the deep, deep valley far below you, and you feel very palpably the isolation from the busyness and the noises and the rushing and the concerns of this world. It is your safe place. It's late in the afternoon and you look up at the sky above the mountains ahead of you, and it's a brilliant blue, not a single cloud. You can see all of the sky, horizon to horizon. It's so massive. You get lost in the blue. Now the sun begins to set far away and opposite the window. Golden rays of light enter the room. Everything is bathed in this beautiful golden light. The edges of the window, your hands, you turn around to look at your room, and every single object you imagine is covered in this beautiful glowing light. It's so bright, it's almost coming from the objects it's touching. You notice in the center of the room a cushion, a meditation cushion, and you take your seat there. You make your way to the cushion and you sit in meditation posture. It is a perfect place. In your meditation posture, bathed in golden light, you call upon an enlightened being, your teacher, the highest evolution of mind you can imagine. In whatever form they appear to you, you imagine them coming into the room and taking a seat in front of you, just you and them. If you can't imagine a specific being, imagine a presence, a palpable presence in front of you, just you and them. As if the Dalai Lama has walked into the room, or Mother Teresa, Gandhi, or someone like that. And you actually can feel what it's like to be close to someone like that. whether every energy is devoted to helping others as much as themselves or more. If you have a specific practice, you can imagine your teacher. And there's nothing to do in this golden room. It's just you and them. You imagine being in front of them. There's nothing else to think about except to be in a presence of a mind like that. You allow your mind to consider the high qualities of that being. And you imagine what it would be like to feel the kind of love they feel. To understand the workings of the world like they understand them. And if you're capable, you may, in your meditation, open your eyes and look into theirs and do nothing else but stare into each other's eyes for a while. If that's too difficult, just imagine being close. Nothing else to do. Now try and imagine that the source of their compassion and wisdom, their highest quality, resides somewhere at their heart level, back towards the spine. You can imagine this as light, as a flame, as a diamond, any of those, brilliant and bright. Imagine that it's the source of where their goodness comes from at their heart. Imagine that it is the intensity of our sun condensed into the size of a pea, just as powerful and bright, there in front of you. Love. And then imagine that they have this same love for you, and from their heart comes a bright ray of light that touches your heart, and you feel what it is like to be loved unconditionally. The wish that you do not hurt ever again, and the wish that you have everything you want. Imagine that filling your heart. imagine that the sensation of bliss that comes from feeling that turns into the wish that other people you love can feel this same thing. And so think of the people you love most, imagine them all over the world, your parents, your children, your partners, your friends, and send out rays of light from your heart to theirs. Imagine they don't know why they suddenly feel love and happiness and joy and free from suffering. Imagine you're sending forth this sensation to them, and it catches them by surprise in whatever act they're in, if they're sleeping or if they're working. And a smile comes on their face, and they feel happy. They feel free. And just keep the rays of light flowing from the teacher to you, from you to everyone. And once that feels good and healthy, see if you can expand that to people you may not know, people you cross on the subway, people in parts of the world that are hungry, and the light turns into sustenance for them. Friendship for the lonely, protection for the afraid. Direction for the lost. Once you see yourself blanketing most of the world with this love, do one last step and imagine all the people that have hurt you in the past, and give them that love too, in the form of forgiveness, understanding, hoping that they never have to feel what you felt with them. Release them from the grip of negative emotions. And actually imagine all these beings for a fraction of a second or a day, or for as long as you can, truly free from the grips of suffering. Never again having to experience an emotion that takes over them, that's negative. And then gradually begin to withdraw the light, leaving the impact of it in the world. Coming back to your heart, to your golden room, and slowly begin to bring the teacher into your heart, the room into your heart, until there's a tiny replica of that scene deep in your heart. Bring your awareness to this room. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you. That changes things, doesn't it? When you do a nice little meditation. Thank you. Thank you. Look at this. Thank you. Liquids. Okay. So this is the Asian Classics Institute course 10 out of 18 courses. It is the condensed version of what a Tibetan monk or nun might study in a Tibetan monastery over a period of 20 to 20 plus years. So we're really getting the highlights of the highlights. We are studying this one text called the Bodhisattva Charavatara, which is the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. Out of the 18 courses, 3 courses are devoted to this text, and another course is devoted to the vows related to this text. It is really the most important and condensed sutra practice, meaning open teaching practice, that there is to develop a heart of compassion. To experience what it's like to be a sentient, a being on this planet that is not just locked into the habits of being just human. Yeah. That goes beyond that experience of having to be locked into the conception of oneself as human only, and all the noise that comes with that conception, including the afflictions. If I'm human, I'm this. If I'm not that, I can't be this. Really, the path to enlightenment, to Buddhahood, to Buddha, to wake, right? To wake up goodness. Yeah. The path to that is to break open the things that lock us into a conception that keeps us cycling in samsara, these cycles, mini cycles daily, and long-term life cycles, universal cycles. In the Abhidhammakosha, the foundational book for Buddhist cosmology, the cycle of universes that come and go with beings like us for time without beginning, eons and eons of creatures like us coming and going, coming and going. And to think that it's just this planet, without going crazy and thinking, oh, there's green Martians somewhere. Just the conception that there are other beings, other entities, other sentients in this expanse of universe that we perceive. Forget the stuff we don't even perceive, right? So this book actually is a guide, a map to begin that journey that says, what is it that is this sentient being? What is it to be a creature like this? And why am I limited to this perspective, and cannot break that open for the sake of myself and other beings, to break out of that cycle of samsara, which is the cycles of you get happy, you get sad, you get something. The same thing that brings you that something is the same energy that takes it away. As soon as you're born, you will die. As soon as something is caused to give you a sensation, you must necessarily lose that sensation, yeah, by the very forces that brought it on. And they are not out there. You are the key player. You are fully responsible, completely and utterly, for your existence, according to Buddha and the Buddhist view. So investigating that as a new idea, because we don't have that as an understanding unless you're an exceptional creature, right? Like Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, etc. There are beings on this planet who naturally wake up and look at another being and say, I want as much happiness for you as I would ever want for this body, for me. The separation between you and me is gone for some creatures, and we look at them and we aspire towards them and we admire them and we wish there's something that informs us, that gives us a sense of, if I could have that, if I could understand that, then something would sustain us. It's like a food, it's a sustenance, right? We admire it. And if you get to practice this, if you get close to conceiving of what it would be like to be like that, you all of a sudden, if you begin a path of compassion, you all of a sudden become aware of your limitations. So I'm going to be a nice person, right? So I'm going to try and be a nice, compassionate person. But already I've had negative thoughts about some poor person on the train, some poor person at work. I hate the person that got the promotion. I don't like the guy that's got more hair than me. Why does he, with the teacher, the other teacher is teaching the other way. Like, as soon as you decide to enter this idea that I'm going to figure out how to gain this heart of compassion, you become instantly aware of your obstacles to it, which are nothing but your habituation. They're not set in stone. And as humans, we have those habituations. This chapter, what we are talking about today, in the first chapter, we talked mostly about the motivation for studying this incredible text, which is in poetry, and it's a stunningly beautiful text. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and every great teacher since it was written make commentaries and talk about this text. Yeah. So I'm going to do a quick review for those of you who were here to make sure that we remember the essence of what's covered in the course, because after the course is finished, it's highly unlikely that you will get to study the Bodhisattva Charyavatara at this depth ever. I mean, you can read a book, but it's different to actually getting the commentary from who wrote the commentary to the book we're studying. Gyaltsab J, who was the student of who was Tsongkhapa, the teacher of first Dalai Lama, lived around 1350 something.
14 something.
Come on, Evan.
I can answer the other question.
Yeah.
1250 or
1357
and
57 to 1419, something like that. Cool. Thank you. So that's the commentary, right? So it's the transmission. So you get the text, the root text, which is traditional Tibetan way of learning. You get the root text, which is the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, written by Master Shantideva around the year 700 AD, right? The same time that the Vikings were getting into England, for the same time that Machu Picchu was becoming the center of the Inca Empire, the same time that Baghdad was the golden era of Islam, etc. So in India, there's this monk called Master Shantideva. He wasn't called Master at the time. This is just review to make sure you get the highlights of the highlights of the highlights, right? He wasn't called Master Shantideva. The people at Nalanda Monastery, which is the Alexandria of Asia at the time, were calling him Mr. Three Thoughts, right? They weren't calling him Master Shantideva. There's something about his biography that is informing you about how to put into practice the text that he wrote. Okay, so it's funny, but it's also very interesting, because once you think about it, meditate on why is this character in this way? What's the mythology behind this being, right? Called Mr. Three Thoughts, not Master Shantideva. What were the three thoughts that the thousands of monks at Nalanda thought this guy mostly had? Eating, sleeping, and pooping, right? So they thought, oh, Master Shantideva, he was just this slob to most other people who was wasting the monastery's precious time and money by eating, pooping, and sleeping. Yeah? And so they had a ploy to get him out of the monastery by embarrassing him. Remember this? Yeah? And asking him to do a teaching in front of thousands of monks, which is the tradition, right? You get somebody to reciting from memory. So they thought, the fat slob's never going to do it. He's going to get embarrassed and he's going to go away, right? It's about 7 something AD. And so they prepared a throne. I'm telling the story again so we get the highlights. So they prepared a throne that was higher than normal and no steps to the throne. So he'd first of all be embarrassed about getting up to the throne, right? And do you remember what happened when he got to the throne? So he's walking down the aisle, thousands of monks sniggering.
Instantly.
And he touches the throne and all of a sudden he's up there and people are like, what happened? Right? What happens? So this is the mythology around Master Shantideva, Mr. Three Thoughts, and he says, do you want me to teach you something you already know, or do you want me to recite something new? And they'll want, oh, tell us something new, you know. And he recites this text, Bodhisattva Charavatara, from memory in beautiful poetry that is apparently even more beautiful in Sanskrit, although the Tibetan itself, the Tibetan translation is equally magnificent. And it's got how many chapters? 10. And do you remember the first chapter? The benefits. Yeah, great. Why develop bodhicitta? Right? We covered that in the last class. So we talked about the benefits of this idea called bodhicitta. When that's translated into English, bodhi means Buddha or enlightenment. Great. Chitta mantra. Okay, mind. What's chitta mantra? Mind only school, right? Chitta, mind. Mm-hmm. Chitta. So sometimes it's translated into English as mind of enlightenment or enlightenment mind, right? But it isn't. It's what's the definition of bodhicitta according to Master or Buddha Maitreya? Definition of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta.
It's the wish
For enlightenment.
For enlightenment.
For the sake of all.
Excellent. That's the short definition, right? So this thing we're talking about, the goal or the result of the text, it's got 10 chapters, right? That mostly covers this thing called the 6 perfections. The goal is to develop this mind of enlightenment, or the wish. Think about the words, okay? You are continuously living in a state of wishing, of every action is driven towards this goal, wishing for enlightenment, meaning you wish that whatever is occurring to you, you can perceive from a state of mind of enlightenment, that you don't have to be locked in samsara, that you break out of the cycles that cause ups and downs, comings and goings, as suffering. Yeah, not that everything freezes and nothing stops moving. Is that the experience of reality as suffering can stop. Yeah, that you are freed from that. You constantly have this state of mind, but you don't just have it for yourself. You don't just say, I wish I never again have to see the angry boss, the shitty boyfriend, the girlfriend that breaks up with me, the cheating partner, the broke bank account, the empty wallet, the blah blah blah, and all the things, the angry person yelling at me, the children demanding, the etc. Whatever causes your mind disharmony completely disappears, and that you wish that every experience that of this thing we call life and living can be bliss for yourself. And if you can do that for yourself, then your children, your sisters, your mothers, your brothers, and every person that we imagined in the meditation, if you could figure out how to get that state of mind, then you could truly help other beings get that, right? So the definition of bodhicitta is to get that state of that wish for enlightenment for the sake of every living being. And that begins to color your mind, until you actually get the wish. So there's 2 types of bodhicitta described in the first chapter. They were in the form of a prayer, a wish, right? They say form of a prayer, meaning you wish you could think that way. You know you don't, right? Because I know, I mean, even coming to this class, I was annoyed at a few people. I'm like, I'm going to teach about getting the heart of compassion. What a fat slob. You know, like he wasn't nice. I mean, you become acutely aware at your own blockers from that state of mind. I wish I could see the world like Mother Teresa sees the world, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama sees the world. To have the natural, uncontrived capacity for that. And then you catch your blockers, right? And this is your path, this is your work. The beautiful thing from the Buddhist point of view is that once you recognize that the entire experience of world, of life, that you conceive in your consciousness, in your mind, the way that that is produced and you are forced to experience is changeable. Once you recognize it's changeable by doing internal work in your mind and in your engagement with others and how you conceive and act and behave and so on, then you know that your world can shift. Because if the world was the way it is from its own side, nobody could ever change it, you see. If things were the way they appear, solid from their own flight, there would never be anything else other than what they are. The fact that things are changeable proves this big idea in Buddhism called emptiness. Yeah, and the other side of the coin of emptiness is karma dependent arising. Right? And so the fact that things change means that things are produced. If things are produced, then you know how to change them. If you know how to work at that code level. The problem in samsara is that we think the way to stop a yelling boss is to yell back, which is planting an imprint in your consciousness to experience more yelling, which means you yell and you get locked in these cycles. Understanding that that's not the way to work this planet, this consciousness, this life, this experience, understanding that, knowing that, begins to break down the fabric of the matrix, and then you see the true essence of where the world is coming from. If you are at peace, you will experience peace. But you can produce it. It doesn't just happen because you wish it. Yeah, we discussed that. So, world is empty from its own side. It's not the way it appears. But we operate as if it is the way it appears. And in that ignorance, in that not knowing, we create more causes for more of the same. Yelling begets yelling, anger begets anger, and so on. So everything produced here has a lifespan. These are the forces that we are mostly unconscious of that produce our ups and downs and up and down. And so this wisdom, this Buddha wake-upness says you can experience this same state of being without those cycles because you are operating at the causal level. Does that make sense? Yeah? And this book in particular covers the whole expanse of how to get to that state of mind for the sake of yourself and others. That was class 1, right? So the essence here is Master Shantideva might look like Mr. Three Thoughts. And as he continued to teach this magnificent thing, the 15 or 2,000 monks sitting there going, something magical is going on. We thought, I mean, they're all Buddhist monks being Buddhists, you know. We think we know this stuff, and here are these words. There was actually nothing new in the way in what he taught. It was the way that he put it together, and it was so practical and usable that it appeared new. And in that newness, in that freshness, became a teaching that was unshakable since that time and woke people up to this day. And the lineage of teaching student is what we have in the room now. So the story of Master Shantideva is important because you don't know who's waking you up. The fat slob on the train or the sad person on the train. I mean, yesterday we were on the train, there was this lady that dropped her cart, you know. She seemed like a special person to me, you know, and I felt a complete sense of interacting with this lady in a very particular way. I felt compelled to by her presence, yeah. And so the mere fact that I begin to think and conceive of that person as an emanation of some enlightened entity, of some Buddha nature appearing to me, calling me to action, forces me that whatever she needs from me, I'm going to act. And that way, the practical way of developing compassion begins. And then before we get there, we have to do a whole bunch of things, which is the essence of chapter 2. Chapter 2 is in 4 parts. It's really one part. It's called purification. Yeah. Before you even start developing the heart of compassion, we have so many blockers in our psyche, in our state of being, that we, mostly don't know about our blind spots. We don't know what we don't know about the things that stop us. So Master Shantideva says there are 4 steps to purification. It's actually 3 preliminaries to purification and purification. Purification of what? Purifications of the things, your blind spots that allow you not to be compassionate uncontrollably and naturally. For those of you who have children, you have that sense already. You're forced to have this kind of compassion most of the time, except when you want to punch the little shits. So I'm an uncle, I can say that. I mean, I remember. I mean, I have this beautiful nephew. I think he was about 11 at the time, and he wanted to come on vacation for 2 weeks with me alone. Right? We went away because he wanted to meditate and all this, and he was such a little angel, except for when he was with me. So he came over to meditate where I was in a different town. They lent him to me, yeah, and they made him promise that he would do his homework every evening at a certain time, and that was the deal, and that was agreed. And I'm not a dad, I'm the uncle, which means you get them for all the fun times, and as soon as they misbehave, you return them full of chocolate and sugar, and so then this one day he just said no. I'm like, but you promised you'd do the homework. He goes, no, I want to go in the swimming pool. I'm like, no, I'll sit here, I'll do the homework with you. We have to do the homework. No. I'm like, what do you mean no? We said yes. I'm not doing it. And there was no one, it was just me and this 11-year-old going, no. I'm like, I don't understand no. You said yes. The deal was, we're not going playing, we're not doing swimming pool, we're not doing anything until you do your homework. So it became, I'm a good Buddhist practitioner, I think, right? So here is an 11-year-old in my face forcing me to get angry, right? Like it's his fault that I am angry. And all of a sudden I recognize that I am in a standoff with an 11-year-old. Like, I'm not moving until you do your homework.
That's the worst.
It doesn't work. You totally won. I had to walk out of the house and sit by the steps. And I was so worked up.
You put yourself in the timeout.
I put myself in the timeout. He totally won. He didn't do his homework. And he didn't have any remorse for it either. I digress. How did I get there? Forgot. Anyway, for those of you that have children, you have natural compassion. You know what it's like. I mean, it would eat you up to see your children suffer, unnecessarily. It is said that it's that kind of feeling for every single being on the planet, and then some. It is said to be like that. Even though sometimes you have a standoff, you have this deep, deep compassion for these beings that are partly you, right? That they're a little entity of their own. Like you are to your parents. To have that feeling expand and include every being is to have bodhicitta uncontrollably. To wish nothing but their happiness in the deepest sense of that word. And there's definitions to that, etc. in Tibetan Buddhist definitions. So Master Shantideva says, before we even get to practice the stuff that is to get that sensation, that emotion, uncontrollably, you need to break away the obstacles that are preventing you from even having those feelings. And so these are 3 preliminaries to purification. Purification we'll do next class, which some of you have done. And purification means, I'm going to use Buddhist words, but don't get lost in the map of Buddhism or whatever ism or the words themselves. These are pointers to a reality. It's like thinking that gravity is an apple falling down. That's not gravity, or gravity is some chart that someone made or an equation. That is not gravity. Gravity is that thing that you can't point to and grab and touch and so on. You can only have an experience of it. All these other things are expressions that allow a limited human brain, mind, to capture an essence through a code or diagram or picture or etc. So don't get lost in the Buddhist terms, because that's a trap too, yeah? As it is for every religion, I think. The thing you are purifying are the karmas. Karmas are the mental imprints, the things that naturally for you, force you to experience a thing in a certain way. And in all previous classes, we know the emptiness of things, right? So, meaning things don't have a nature from their own side. There is nothing inherent in this object that forces anybody to say this is a holy object of prayer or this is a mala. There is nothing in this object that forces the perceiver, the mind of a being that engages with this object. There's nothing emanating out here going, Buddhist mala. Yeah? There's nothing in this. This is empty of that self-existent nature. There is nothing existing here from this side. It's so simple we miss it. Catch again. There is nothing here from this side that is forcing any entity that is engaging with this object to experience this object like you are experiencing it. Yeah, and we can say that for all humans to experience it. We get a whole bunch of animals in here, and they are people too. Their perceptions are valid as much as your perceptions are valid. Not only that, they are forced to act on their perceptions as much as you are forced to act on your perceptions. So, if an elephant comes in here, if an ant comes in here, if a dog comes in here, if a baby comes in here, if a human comes in here, and we put this in front of them, every conception of that thing is different. You could say, oh, but they all see round. But they don't label it round, you see. For ants, they don't label it round. They'll label it woody, they don't label it woody. And the more you investigate, the smaller and smaller and smaller you go into investigate where the hell is this thing that I'm experiencing, because it is a mala and it is a bead and it is round for you. Yeah? So it is something, karma. But it's not that from its own side. It's not that independent of you. That is emptiness of this object. And that is true for this object, this object, this object, this life, the breath, the idea of human. We are empty of being. Every single object that is empty, has an emptiness to it. Every karma that produces that everything that is has this isn't-ness. Yeah, it has a selfless. That's what selfless means. It means there is no self-nature to this object.
Isn't that a rosary?
It could be a rosary, depending who you ask, you see. And we have conventions, and we are talking about a conventional object here, saying a rosary. This is the core and the essence. Are you hearing the phone? Oh, you look like something's happening to you. I'm going to put it away. The reason why this is important is because the world that you experience is the world that you experience because you are forced to experience your world through the imprints that produce your life like your life is. This life is not just this way. Not everybody on this planet that is human gets to experience life in New York City with nice hot warm showers or shitty cold lofts or etc, etc, etc. We know if you've traveled around a little bit that being human doesn't guarantee you any kind of state of mind, doesn't guarantee you any kind of food, doesn't guarantee you any kind of nurturing, any kind of love. Being human, we call human this group of beings that seem to have most of these parts together, and we say that's a human, right? But I know some animals that live better than humans, and I know some humans that live worse than animals. I have met with both of those kinds of creatures and beings, yeah? But you can say, oh, but that conceives the world in a different way. Believe me, I have seen beings that we call human, unable to speak, unable to connect in the human way, but they have a human body, right? So what we are purifying is the thing that prevents our mind from engaging with this heart of compassion. We do this with 3 preliminary practices, which I'll cover today.
Does the object have an emptiness from its own side?
No, emptiness is empty.
Right.
Yeah, so, and then you get into deeper and deeper teaching. So it's good to have that question, but my advice, it was the hardest thing to listen to. Geshe Michael say this 1,000 times. I wanted to throw beads at him. I wanted to throw pens at him. You know, I'm like, I heard that already. And then one day you go, oh my God, I never heard what he just said before. It was something like, it was drilling into, and then the Dalai Lama said it, and then this other being said it. I'm like, oh my God, that I didn't know. And I've been a practicing Buddhist for all this time. That's why I say it's so simple, you miss it. Of course there's no nature in this thing. You know this intellectually. It's not a big deal. It's so simple. But you live your life as if it is coming from this. The angry person, the one that made you angry, is crappy from their own side. You didn't get angry because you've got something negative in you vomiting out onto them. They forced you to be angry by not doing their homework. Yeah, and no, that he did. You see, at that moment, you couldn't sit there and have an emptiness conversation with me. I'm pointing at him, and it's like, it's his fault. And that's why I'm angry, because the anger is incongruent with reality. He is the vehicle by which my reality is getting angry. No problem there. But there is nothing in that behavior. You know why there's nothing in that behavior that forces anger? Because now I can laugh about it. And if you were watching, you'd be laughing at me. Because I called my brother, and that's what he did. He laughed. There is nothing inherent in anything. And this is scary once you get it, because what it does for the regular human experience is it drops the ground from under you, and you are groundless. There is no ground for you to be angry anymore. There's no ground for your reality to exist the way it has always existed. Or all of a sudden, all of a sudden, my voice is like this because last night I had a beautiful holy gift from Georgina and Evan. They took us to this place called the Apollo Theatre. Who's been to the Apollo Theatre? Oh my, amateur night. Oh my God. Talk about a heart of compassion. I was moved like I hadn't ever been moved before in a performance, to completely love those beings on stage. First of all, there were little kids who had amazing talent, and then the host made us, the entire room, the whole of the theatre, hold hands, and told us that this feeling that we have is what we truly are. That there is no separation between us tonight. And that we are there to make those little kids on stage and the adults as well feel completely like stars. Completely. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness. It broke me open. It was magnificent. So I decided to yell really loud, and now to be part of the experience, I'm like, yes! So now I get the that's last week's class. Let's get teaching. Okay, we got review class 1, review class 2. The purpose of this class is to do chapter 2, which has 4 sections. The essence is purification, but before, what Master Shantideva says, before you can actually get to truly purify, right? To truly conceive of yourself as having those negative things that prevent you from having bodhicitta, the heart of compassion. Before you can get to removing those, you need to remove the blockers to purification. Does that make sense? To have a true conception that you are able to remove your blockers, you need to get yourself into a state of mind. That's what he's saying. And there are 3 preliminary practices that Buddhists do And it's very different to what it looks like when you get to the guts of it and understand what's going on. And those 3 preliminary practices are prostration, and I'll talk about what it really means tonight. Taking refuge, thinking what is protection from the state of mind of selfishness, the state of mind of ego, the state of mind of thinking things come from themselves and therefore that's why I'm angry. And so I'm angry at it. Producing more anger. You see, my mind is colored with anger as soon as I think Aidan produced my anger, and my anger is directed at him and I am justified and you're a little shit and whatever I'm doing, my mind is just getting colored with anger. It's just got 1,000 imprints of anger. It doesn't matter that he called me whatever he called me or he did this. It doesn't matter. What matters is that my mental continuum now has millions of tiny seeds called little angers that are sitting in my consciousness growing at some later time to get more angry. Because the ignorance of being human is to think that the way to stop that kind of thing is to do that kind of thing. Stop the yelling by yelling. Stop the taking by taking. Stop the force by force. And in fact, Buddhism says, wake up-ism says, it is the opposite. It is the opposite thing that changes the world. The only way to get rid of anger is through compassion and love. And that does not mean you have to be a stupid idiot and let yourself get run over and get yourself... That's also ignorance if you think that's what you have to do. It's this middle way of understanding where things come from, not from their own side. There is something in your consciousness forcing you to experience reality in a certain way we call human. And for that moment, the thing forcing me to perceive Aidan as making me angry was the anger in me. Because if I did not have those karmas, those imprints in my consciousness, if I never had those capacities in my consciousness, there'd be no way that he could get me angry. I would laugh at him. I would think of other things. It would just not move me. But the fact that this entity got angry at that entity meant that the anger is in here. There is no anger or negativity forcing its way into me and therefore creating my mental... I mean, it doesn't work like that. But we operate in the world as if it does. And that in Buddhism is called ignorance. And it's not ignorance like we know it in English or in our world. It's a misknowing, which is actually worse than not knowing. Misknowing is doing activity. It's like thinking you're a brain surgeon and you're not, you're a car mechanic, and someone puts you in brain surgery and you think, I can do that, no problem. That's misknowing, as opposed to going, oh, I don't know how to do that. That's a little bit less troublesome. Our condition, a human condition, is misknowing where things come from, not knowing that there's a code under the matrix, that it's not the way it appears. And so the beginning of practice, specifically this preliminary practices and then purification, and later on the development of bodhicitta, which we're not going to get to until the class after next, right, hinges on the capacity of your consciousness, your own capacity, because I can't do it for you, Buddha can't do it for me. Once you get this understanding, it hinges on your capacity to understand karma and the functions of cause and effect in the way that mind creates your world. Emptiness, the thing that there's nothing out there forcing you to experience the world it is. Therefore, you're walking through the matrix. It's appearing as a solid reality because it feels like a solid reality, but you are all of a sudden operating with that bigger understanding and therefore truly causing a magical transformation of this world from a samsaric world to an enlightened world. It hinges on your capacity to keep that in mind in every action. And that's important for tonight's class because we're talking about a prostration, a refuge taking, which is in the form of a prayer or a ceremony and so on. And to the outside eye, it just looks like more, to me at the beginning, it looked like some more bloody Catholic ritual.
You didn't say the third one or the fourth.
Good. The fourth thing is purification.
Yeah. Oh, just.
And that's next week. The third thing is making offerings. And we did them all at the beginning of class. and we probably did them all wrong. There's this joke in the monasteries that there was this, I can't remember where it came from actually, that there was this teacher teaching to thousands of monks this important Buddhist teaching, their experience of the universe, their relationship to other beings and themselves is so more wisdom than some high priest, lama, whatever. You don't know. You really don't know if you're honest. All you know is what you're doing. So I hope to transmit some of that information. There's a couple of ways of sharing information, right? You can read a book about playing guitar and then go buy yourself a guitar. And that's a method, there's no problem. Then you can get yourself a friend who plays guitar and you share the book and they go, yeah, but they're equally shitty players, and so you're learning their mistakes as well as their things. And then you can, hopefully you get yourself a teacher, you get yourself some people who know how to play guitar really, really well and can show you all the steps and shortcut you to your level of natural capacity, and then you actually have to work. Yeah, and that's a fast track in, and that's what the Tibetans were amazing at. The Tibetans grabbed these ideas from the Indians when Buddhism went into other areas of the world, and it went into the Tibetan Valley up there. And then because it's freezing cold, nobody ever goes up there, they just sat there and all they did was this. They changed their language to this, they changed their religion to this, they changed their army disappeared, and all they did is become keepers of this, and they became anally retentive about understanding what it is like to play that instrument called wake up, wake up, wake up, Buddha, Buddha, get enlightened. And for 1,000 years, people didn't know about them. That's why it's a big deal. It's the most authentic teachings from the time of the Buddha, because it disappeared in India. And I guess let's see, make sure I cover everything, and then I'll tell you. I wanted to tell you two things. I'm going to ask you to repeat some Tibetan words so you get a sense of those keepers of this information. So say Gyalken, Gyalken, and Tunken. So these two are, a gyal is a hindrance, ken is a condition. So we have hindrances that prevent us from getting this state of mind, and then a tun is a conducive condition. Some people have a natural ability to do certain things, right? So they say, oh, I want to learn how to cook, and all of a sudden they land a friend who has a supersized kitchen with fire, and other people say, I want to learn how to cook, and then they get everything, but they don't have gas or something, they have these hindrances. So they said we have some gyalkens and some tunkens. We have to get rid of the hindrances that prevent us from developing this heart, and we have to grow and develop the conditions that we have that are conducive, and each of us are very different for different aspects of the path to enlightenment. And for the part of compassion, I don't know where you're at. I just know where I'm at, and it's still, I've been practicing 17 years, it's still not that good. So the idea of what blocks us from getting this bodhicitta, this heart of compassion, is what we're talking about today, doing prostrations. The idea here is that, we sit here and we go, blah, blah, blah. We do, if you've been doing it a long time, we do, yeah.
I wonder if they could change the tune, like upbeat it.
Yeah. We should go to Apollo and do that. Whatever it is that makes it alive for you, you got to do it. You see, but doing it just here is like going to guitar classes with a teacher, and then going home, putting your guitar in the closet, and waiting for 2 weeks' time to come back and go, okay, let's learn again. And they're going to ask you, did you practice? Did you do the scales? Do you know how? Did you build any calluses yet? Have you figured it out? And you're like, no, teach me the next one. You see, I can't do it for you. Nobody can do it for me either. At some point, you take charge of your own inner development, and you practice. And so for you, it might be, that chant is so boring, it puts me to sleep. I'm going to use, and if you want a nicer melody to it, you should listen to the FPMT Center does a nice melody to that chant. Yeah. So what's her name? Rabina. Yeah, Venerable Rabina. Australian nun, powerful woman. So I talk a little bit about prostration. I didn't want to do it. You know, I grew up Catholic, and it's actually one of the first things that made me think that Geshe Michael was something important for me. Actually, one of the few things when I first met my teacher, Geshe Michael, because he would say things that would be so personally applicable that I'm like, he can't know that stuff. You know, how does he know that stuff? And so it was magic for me. And I understand that not everybody had that experience with him or has that experience with him, but for me, it was like, all of a sudden I was in orbit to something bigger than the sun, and I couldn't resist it. Sometimes it burnt and it felt horrible, but it was definitely a magnetism. And when he described this experience of his about prostration, it really got me, you know. So he talked about being in his 20s and going to India because he needed to get this philosophy, and he wanted to be a Buddhist or study Buddhism and so on. He was a good Catholic, a good Christian in Arizona and the rest, and he got to India, and he said he was told he was 1,000 years too late because Buddhism finished in India. There's no Buddhism in India. So they said, if you want to go, you should go to the Tibetans. They're all in Dharamsala. All goes to another country. So he went to Dharamsala. I noticed that it's finished here, so 1,000 years too late. Well, the wall moved down south and east, and sorry. So he talks about that, and he says, you know, on the bus ride to Dharamsala, he was paranoid. He said, and it made me feel like exactly like I felt when I first encountered these teachings. It's not for me. It's probably a bunch of weirdos that know their stuff really well. I'm going to be out of place. I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to ask stupid questions, and you know, I'm probably going to be the odd thing out, and it's probably not going to fit me. Yeah. I'm interested, like there was a compulsion to do something because regular life wasn't cutting it. Regular information, TV, and all the other things that inform our society wasn't cutting it for him. Plus, he had all these deaths in his family and so on. So he remembers being on the bus to Dharamsala having all these thoughts, and then he gets in there, and sure enough, there's a big Rinpoche, and there's all these students, and they all know how to do wah 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 and all this other stuff. And he's like, see, you know, I knew I wouldn't fit, you know. And then they do prostrations, and he's like, and that was the thing for him. That was the killer. That he goes, I was a good Christian, and I completely felt this when I first met the Buddhists. I was a good Christian, and then one of the commandments is thou shalt not bow to carved images or whatever. Does anyone know what that is?
False idols.
False idols, thanks Evan. Expert in religion. Reverend Evan. Thank you very much. Good Catholic. That's funny. So he goes, you know, I waited my whole life to not ever bow down to these idols, and here was my one opportunity. I'd been waiting all my life to not bow down, and here I am, I'm not going to bow down. You know, like this was the one chance I could leave that commandment. You know, there's no other excuse to leave that commandment. And I felt exactly the same. I thought so many things. I thought, you know, they're all wearing red robes, and so they look like the devil, and you know, it's like all these bizarre ideas in my mind preventing me to do this stupid-looking posture, which is get myself on the ground, blah 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 blah. I had all this resistance. I'm going to look stupid. I don't know what to do. I don't believe in this anyway. It's some Eastern custom. I had all these things, right? But then the dichotomy got me after session after session after session. So I'd come into classes like this, except there were 100 people or so on. Geshe Michael was teaching this course in the 90s. And they were all doing that prolong and doing the prostrations. And all I had was a sense of, like it was harder and harder each class for me to stay standing in the corner, like Aiden being, I'm not doing my homework. It wasn't a kindness, it wasn't like an acceptance that they can do what they like. It was really almost like a negative force, like a negative gravity that was pushing me away from doing that behavior, until I learned more and more and more and more about what the practice actually was. And then at some point I did it more to break my stubbornness than to do any kind of reverence, because I knew that the state of mind that was holding me back from doing any kind of prostration was actually negative state of mind that was producing more negativity in my mind. And my ego and myself was getting so inflated, going, oh, I'm a special person, I'm standing on the corner and all these idiots are prostrating. You know, like I had this pride, and I knew that was sickening for me. The others didn't care. You know, they were prostrating, they're doing their thing. And it was so hard to break. I can't tell you, it was my first breaking point where you surrender, not to anything or anyone, but to your recognition that you are being stupid with your inner life. Yeah, and so I dropped myself to the ground, and I felt all the judgment that I'd felt for all of them. I felt it on my first stupid prostration, and then some, and then some, and so it became medicine. It became medicine for me. Each prostration, it wasn't a prostration like I'm going to show you. I'm going to teach you what it's supposed to be, but for me, it became medicine for the thing that began a path out of self-centeredness, out of self-focus, out of selfishness. Yeah, and particularly in this class, because this class is about releasing yourself from all the troubles of having to protect that self, that precious identity that doesn't exist in the way you think it exists anyway. You're not that thing that you think you are. You never were. You never will be again. You're a changing thing. You're forever evolving. You can't be fixed into this thing, you know. So the freedom that comes from breaking away from that self-centeredness, for me, was the beginning of that thing called prostration. And it was magical because it hurt so much. But in the hurt there was a release as well. So prostration, I'll have a short thing to say and then we'll have a break and then I'll do the other two. A prostration you usually do towards a holy object, right? So I prostrate to the seat, and as I do this, I imagine a whole lineage of teachers that have ever sat there and had some wisdom, and I say, please, may I get even an inkling of that, and so may my words touch other people, even a smidgen to what they have touched me from other teachers. May I invoke that power that you have. I bow down to the wisdom that exists in this lineage. I am not a worthy vessel. In my mind, I'm doing these things, right? And even that's not a proper prostration. It's supposed to also say, you know, may all the negative states of mind, body, and speech that I have be removed, and may I think like a Buddha, may I act like an enlightened being, may I speak like an enlightened being. That's getting closer. The true meaning of prostration, if you get past all your own self-centeredness around it, and I can speak to this a little bit from unknowing, fortunately, is that when you have some kind of realization of truth, when you get some kind of realization of the nature of existence, when you sit there and you work your ass off on the cushion, when you bump into your own selfishness day after day, decade after decade, and you get some tiny reward from your own experience, you sit in meditation and something opens up that maybe you worked for 10 years for. And something opens up that lets you see the totality of who you are in relation to everything, and how the way you thought it was is not the way it was. When you get that kind of freedom and you recognize that that came from this wisdom, then your natural instinct is to drop yourself down to the ground in this, and it's not a reverence per se, it's this natural, you drop down because you've just met something that was all-encompassing and all-complete. The silly way of thinking about it, for me, that works for me, is when you see two puppy dogs running towards each other with all this excitement, that are big, beautiful feelings about having their tails are going, and then they get closer and closer, and one of them recognizes the other one's a huge, huge dog, and I'm just a tiny chihuahua. Yeah, and then you just roll over and you go, okay, you know those puppies that do that and go, that's the closest that I've seen of in an animal. But the true sense of a prostration that my teacher says, and that I've heard from other beings that have had this kind of realization, is not what I just explained. That's closer. But it's when you are in the direct experience of ultimate reality, when you've meditated enough, when you've gotten your mind to a point of stability whereby you can leave the sensations of this body and have this thing called the direct perception of emptiness, which means you yourself no longer exist like you think you exist. There's no conception. You are like water poured into water. You are in the code of the matrix, using that metaphor, right? You have an experience of the Dharmakaya, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind, yeah? And you don't recognize that in that experience. You recognize that a Buddha's mind has no inherent existence, like anything has no existence. You have a direct experience of that. Whilst you're having that, you can't have a conception about it. You are just having that experience. When you come down from that experience, you recognize that you just saw a Buddha. You just saw the mind of an enlightened being, an all-encompassing perfection of consciousness, called the Dharmakaya. In a more general term, the emptiness of the three bodies of the Buddha, kayas. Okay? And that creates a kind of a cessation in you, a cessation of doubt, a cessation of not knowing about that specific thing. You recognize that your mind has exactly the same emptiness, the same potential as what you just saw. And you drop yourself down to the ground in a kind of reverence for what you just saw that was projected, right? Because as it comes, it is empty of having that nature. You recognize with wisdom what it is and where it came from. And to that thing, to that capacity, to that possibility that is infinite now, to that freedom from not ever knowing that, you put yourself down and you bow down. And you do that by folding your hands together, putting something in it, yeah, like a jewel. This in Buddhism is not a prayer gesture, that is, okay? And you imagine, some people say a diamond in there that represents emptiness itself. And you touch the top of your head, which means you represent, you wish you could, what you just saw, you imagine that thing called the Dharmakaya, that you can transform your body, your speech, and your mind, which is your heart, yeah? And so you're imagining that presence of what you just saw in the direct perception of emptiness. Each time we do a prostration, you're imagining that in front of you is this presence that relates to what you just saw in the direct experience of emptiness. And if you didn't, then you imagine what that could be like. So it plants the causes, it plants the seeds to have the body, speech and mind of an enlightened being, like that one you're imagining. And that is what you should be doing as you prostrate. Because the mechanics of it is that, like I got angry at Aiden, and I was imbuing my mind with anger, forcing my mind to see thousands of possible moments of future anger that are just growing in my consciousness, in my stream of mind, and I will have to experience because they're in there. They are the causes for my future anger. Equally, filling your mind with a conception of a perfected stream of mind are the causes of experiencing a perfected state of mind. So the more you can imagine an enlightened being, the more you can perceive it and there's no right and wrong way, because it's just an evolution. You see, wherever you're at, you begin to imagine, begin to imagine, begin to imagine. There is no other Buddha than the one that you will experience and are experiencing. There is no other emptiness than the one you just conceive of yourself experiencing. There's no self-existent emptiness. Emptiness is empty. Yeah? But it is a thing. It does function. It is a mala for you. You're forced to see it as a mala. So that is the object of prostration. The object of prostration I'll talk about when we come back, and it's exactly the same object, this Dharmakaya, right? It becomes the essence of the objects of prostration. When we come back in 10 minutes, I'll cover the other two really quickly. Any questions? Cool. Take a 10-minute break, think about enlightenment, and we'll have a little 20-minute catch-up.